I still remember the day we started the company. It was nothing more than a dream in a dusty two-room office in a rundown building downtown. Just me and Daniel, my best friend from college, now my business partner. We had nothing but a couple of laptops, a borrowed printer, and a shared determination to make something out of nothing. Daniel was the visionary, the guy with big ideas. I was the one who kept things grounded, the planner, the strategist, the guy who stayed late fixing things behind the scenes while Daniel pitched to investors. We made a good team. We didn't have titles back then, just tasks. I took care of operations, hiring, payroll, taxes, the unglamorous work that kept the wheels turning. Our first year was brutal. There were nights we slept in the office, running on takeout and caffeine. When we couldn't afford to pay freelancers, I taught myself graphic design. When the books didn't balance, I cut my own salary, sometimes to zero, just to keep us afloat. Slowly, things started to shift. We landed a big client in year 2. By year 4, we moved into a better office. By year 7, we had a team of 15, and Daniel and I finally started taking home decent paychecks. But through it all, I never thought about ownership or shares. I trusted him. We built it together, didn't we? I gave everything to that company, missed family gatherings, worked through illnesses. I even passed on a better paying offer from a major firm because I believed in what we were doing, in what we were building. I thought we were in it for the long haul, but I had no idea what was coming. Not then, not yet. As the years rolled on, the company became more than just a job. It was my life. While most people counted vacation days, I barely took any. I was the first one in, last one out. When we moved to a larger office in our 5th year, Daniel got the corner office with glass walls and a view of the skyline. I didn't mind. I stayed in a shared workspace with the rest of the team. I liked being accessible. Daniel was always out there, shaking hands, making speeches, flying to conferences, and I didn't resent it. In fact, I admired it. He had charisma. He could light up a room, and I knew someone had to hold things down back home while he was outgrowing the brand. That someone was me. I built the systems. I negotiated supplier contracts. I handled crisis after crisis, like the time our server crashed the night before a major launch. I stayed up 38 hours straight restoring data and pulling everything back online. No applause, no spotlight. But that was fine. I didn't do it for the praise. I did it because I believed we were building something important. What hurt, though, was how invisible my efforts became over time. As the team grew, newer employees assumed Daniel was the one making all the magic happen. He was the public face, after all. I started noticing that when we landed big contracts, the congratulations emails would go to him, not me. Clients didn't even know I existed half the time. Internally, Daniel began referring to me as his operations guy, like I was just another middle manager. That stung, but I told myself to stay focused on the mission. Then came the funding round, our 10th year. A big investment firm wanted in. They loved the numbers, the growth, the brand. They wanted to scale us faster, but they also wanted structure, executive titles, reporting lines, formal roles. Daniel called me into a meeting one evening and said, "We need to define things now. Investors want clarity, so I'll be CEO, obviously. You'll be Chief Operating Officer." I was stunned. "Obviously," I asked. "We built this together. Shouldn't this be a discussion?" Daniel smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. "Come on, man. You know I've been the face of this thing. You've always been great behind the scenes. This just makes sense." I nodded slowly. I didn't want to argue. We were on the verge of something huge. I told myself titles didn't matter. As long as I kept doing meaningful work, it would all be fine. But something inside me shifted that day. I started realizing just how different our definitions of partnership were. Still, I put my head down and kept working. We expanded to 2 new cities, hired 30 more people, launched 3 new products, all under my supervision. But Daniel, he started changing. Meetings that used to include the 2 of us became meetings where I was just looped in later. He stopped asking for my input on big decisions. When new investors visited, I was introduced as one of the earliest team members, not the co-founder, not even a partner. Just early, I should have said something. I should have demanded clarity, but I didn't. Maybe because I still believed he would come around. Or maybe I was just afraid to face the truth, that the company I had poured everything into was slowly becoming something I no longer recognized. I told myself things would get better, that loyalty meant something. But I was wrong, so very wrong. By year 12, the company had grown into something unrecognizable from our early days. We had nearly 80 employees, clients across 4 continents, and our brand was being mentioned in major industry publications. On the surface, everything looked like a success story, but behind the scenes, things were starting to rot. Daniel, once driven and focused, began acting more like a celebrity than a CEO. Flashy cars, expensive vacations that he justified as networking retreats. He rarely showed up to the office anymore, and when he did, it was usually for a photo shoot or a high-profile meeting. Meanwhile, I was drowning in the day-to-day grind, managing crises, fixing department silos, patching gaps in communication, and even settling internal conflicts that he didn't even know existed. I started noticing a troubling pattern. Decisions were being made without me. Entire strategic shifts would occur, and I'd only hear about them when they trickled down from department heads who had been briefed by Daniel. When I confronted him about it, he brushed it off. "You worry too much, man. I'm just moving quickly. You'll catch up." Catch up? To a company I practically built from the ground up? That phrase kept echoing in my head for days. And then came the quarterly financial report. For the first time, I noticed serious inconsistencies. Spending had ballooned in areas I hadn't approved. Travel expenses, PR contracts, luxury consultant retainers, all with Daniel's signature. I flagged them during a leadership meeting. Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "Don't worry about those, it's all part of the brand strategy," he said. "But we're burning cash faster than we're generating revenue," I warned. "If we keep this up, we'll be forced to either lay people off or take on more investor debt." He shrugged. "That's how scaling works. You've got to spend big to grow big. Relax, we've got a runway." But I wasn't relaxed, because I was the one speaking to the finance team every day. I was the one who had to figure out how to pay vendors, how to keep payroll running, and how to explain delayed bonuses to the staff who had trusted us with their livelihoods. The real tipping point came a few months later, when we were negotiating a merger opportunity with a mid-sized European firm. I'd spent weeks doing the groundwork, combing through financials, building the synergy model, outlining integration risks. I thought Daniel and I would present together, but the night before the pitch, I received an email from his assistant. "Daniel will handle the presentation solo. Thank you for your support." Support? Was I just support now? The next morning, I watched from the back of the room as Daniel stood in front of the investors and took credit for months of my work. Not once did he mention my name. Not once. I told myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he was nervous and just trying to get the deal done. But later, when I brought it up in private, he said, "Look, man, we can't always share the spotlight. It confuses people. One clear voice is better." You get that, right? Number two, I didn't get that, because what I was beginning to realize was this. Daniel didn't see me as a partner anymore. Maybe he never really did. I was becoming a liability. Someone who knew too much, did too much, and was no longer easy to sideline quietly. Still, I stayed, because I thought after everything we'd been through, he'd never cross a line. Absolutely. Here's Chuaptur. Building toward the climax. There's a certain kind of betrayal that doesn't happen in one moment. It creeps in slowly, quietly, and by the time you realize what's happening, it's already done. After the merger presentation, things between Daniel and me grew increasingly strained. We no longer had real conversations, only formal updates, forwarded emails, and short nods in board meetings. He stopped asking for my opinion on anything strategic. Our relationship, once built on trust and late-night brainstorming sessions, had withered into stiff small talk and passive-aggressive silences. I told myself it was the pressure of growth, the stress of scaling, but deep down I knew better. Then came the first real red flag. Our head of HR, someone I personally recruited and mentored, called me into her office. She was visibly uncomfortable. She said Daniel had instructed her to begin reviewing executive redundancy plans. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just due diligence. Every growing company explores ways to stay lean. But then she said carefully, "Your role was on the list." I laughed, thinking it was some sort of miscommunication. "I'm the co-founder. There is no company without my role." She looked at me, sympathy all over her face. "I know. That's why I thought you should know." I confronted Daniel about it later that week. He brushed it off like it was nothing. "Just investor pressure. You know how they are. Always asking about org charts and succession plans. It's standard procedure." But that wasn't the truth. I knew it wasn't. Because 2 days later, I tried logging into the internal dashboard, something I used daily, and my access was revoked. When I asked IT, they said they were told to limit exposure for high-level data I had built, systems I had architected. A few senior managers who used to loop me in suddenly stopped inviting me to meetings. Projects were reassigned. My calendar, once packed with meaningful oversight and decision-making, became suspiciously light. Then came the shareholders' meeting. I was asked not to attend. Officially, it was because it was investor only, but I had attended every single one since we started seeking external funding. I helped prepare the reports. I helped shape the narrative. Now I was being excluded from the room where the future of the company, my company, was being decided. I remember sitting in my office that day, staring at a whiteboard full of timelines and project roadmaps and realizing I was being pushed out, quietly, methodically, strategically. Daniel was erasing me from the picture, one meeting, one file, one decision at a time. I considered resigning then and there, walking out with my dignity intact. But something held me back. Maybe stubbornness, maybe pride, or maybe the foolish hope that Daniel would come to his senses, that he'd look me in the eye and remember who helped him build it all from the ground up. Instead, what I got was something else entirely. A letter, hand-delivered by the legal team, an invitation to a transition discussion. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't just pushing me aside, he was getting ready to get rid of me. I barely slept the night before the transition discussion. My mind kept looping through every late night, every emergency I handled, every win we celebrated together. I wasn't naive. I knew what was coming. But still, part of me hoped that this was just some temporary move. Maybe a restructuring, maybe a change in title. Something I could still reason through. After all, this was Daniel, my friend, my business partner. The meeting was held in one of the glass conference rooms, the same room where Daniel and I used to brainstorm our biggest ideas. Now the energy was cold, sterile, legal. Daniel didn't even come alone. He brought the head of HR and a corporate attorney. I knew immediately this wasn't a discussion. It was a decision. Daniel began with a polished, rehearsed tone. "First, I want to thank you for your years of contribution. We wouldn't be here without the foundation you helped to build." That sentence alone made me feel sick. "Helped build?" He continued. "As we move into our next growth phase, we've reassessed our leadership structure. After careful review, we've decided it's in the best interest of the company to begin transitioning you out of your current role." No mention of co-founder, no acknowledgement of our shared journey. Just a sanitized explanation, wrapped in corporate jargon. I sat still for a moment, processing the words. "So I'm being fired," I said flatly. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "It's not a termination, it's a transition. We'd like to offer you a generous separation package. 6 months salary, health coverage, and we'll craft a public narrative around you, stepping down to pursue new ventures. We want to respect your legacy." Respect my legacy? He wanted to erase it. I leaned forward. "Did you ever consider talking to me about this before making the decision?" He avoided eye contact. "It wasn't personal. It was strategic. The board feels the company needs a fresh direction." "But we built the direction," I snapped. "There wouldn't be a board if we didn't kill ourselves building this from scratch. You know that." He stayed silent. I looked at the HR rep. She looked down at her notepad. I realized then that this had been in motion for months, maybe longer. The systems access, the missed meetings, the exclusion from key decisions. It was all part of a coordinated exit. They had been waiting for the right time. I felt a wave of emotion swell in my chest. Anger, betrayal, grief. But I didn't let it show. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I assume I'm expected to sign something? I asked. The lawyer slid a thick envelope across the table. Standard severance terms. If you sign, we avoid any public complications. You'll leave with your reputation intact. My reputation. That's all I had left. I didn't take the envelope. I stood up, looked Daniel in the eye, and said quietly, "You could have just told me the truth. You could have had the decency to talk to me like a man." He didn't say a word. As I walked out of the office, I didn't feel free. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty. 15 years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of building something from nothing. And all it took was one carefully planned meeting to erase it. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot, I didn't take the severance. I walked out of that meeting with nothing but my dignity and a mind full of things they didn't know how to replace. That was their mistake. They thought I was just operations, just the guy who kept things running. What they forgot was I was the blueprint. 2 weeks after my departure, the cracks began to show. The first issue, vendor relations. I had built and nurtured those relationships for over a decade. Vendors who trusted me, not the logo. Payment schedules started to slip. Some suppliers began demanding full payment up front, something we'd never faced before. Why? Because I wasn't there to manage expectations, fix errors, or negotiate terms. Then came the client complaints. 2 of our legacy clients, the ones who stuck with us during our early struggle years, threatened to walk away. Apparently, their calls were going unanswered. Deliverables were late. The service that once made us stand out had dropped sharply. And guess who used to oversee those accounts personally? Me. Word started spreading inside the company too. Employees who once had clear direction now felt lost. Teams were clashing, goals weren't aligned, and morale dropped like a rock. I started getting LinkedIn messages from former staff. "It's chaos without you. They're trying to copy your playbook, but no one knows how to run it." I don't think Daniel understands how much you actually did. But the final blow came about 6 weeks after I left. A major project with a new international client completely fell apart. Millions of dollars on the line. And with no one in-house who fully understood the systems I had designed, they couldn't deliver. The client pulled out. Investors got spooked. Revenue projections tanked. I was sitting at home rebuilding my own consulting profile when my phone rang. It was Daniel. I didn't answer. He called again the next day, and the day after that. Finally, he sent a text. "Can we talk? Just 10 minutes, please." When we finally spoke, he tried to play it cool at first. "How have you been?" he asked. I laughed. "Let's skip the small talk." He sighed. "Look, we've had some issues. Things move faster than expected. I might have misjudged the transition." "Misjudged?" I said. "You mean firing your co-founder, gutting the company's core processes, and replacing structure with PR?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Then came the pitch. "We need help stabilizing. Maybe you could come back. As a consultant. Short term, high level." I paused. "So now I'm valuable again?" I asked. "It's not like that," he said too quickly. I sat with the silence for a long moment. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even surprised. I had seen this coming the moment I walked out. They had built a brand on a house of cards, and I was the part they pulled out without realizing the whole thing would collapse. "I'll think about it," I told him. And I meant it, because maybe, just maybe, this time I held the power. When Daniel begged me to come back, he assumed I'd jump at the chance. But what he didn't understand was that when you betray someone who gave everything, you don't just get to snap your fingers and expect them to fix your mess. So yes, I returned, but not out of loyalty, not for friendship. I came back on my terms, and I made him squirm. First, I demanded a formal re-entry contract, not as an employee, but as a high-level consultant with full executive control over operations and systems. My compensation? Triple my previous salary, billed monthly, with no room for renegotiation. I also insisted that all reports, including Daniel, would answer directly to me for a 90-day stabilization period. If I was to clean up the disaster, I was going to own the cleanup. To my surprise, he agreed, but I saw the discomfort on his face when he signed the papers. For the first time in his life, he was not the one in charge. When I walked back into that office, it was surreal. The energy had changed. People looked cautious, like they were unsure how to approach me. Some were embarrassed. Others were just relieved. Word had gotten around that I was the only one who could bring stability back. I didn't make it easy. In our first leadership meeting, Daniel tried to jump in with one of his typical visionary speeches. Lots of buzzwords and vague strategy. I let him finish, then calmly slid a report across the table. This, I said, is the actual situation. Revenue down 23%. 3 major clients lost. Team productivity at 56%. If this is your vision, it's blurry. Silence. He looked stunned. Not because of the numbers, but because no one had ever dared speak to him like that in front of the team. But I wasn't done. Going forward, I added, no one takes major decisions without clearing them with me. We're not running a startup fantasy camp here. We're running a business. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt the company. But I made Daniel watch the process he tried to erase. I called old clients personally, revived accounts they had given up on, and renegotiated contracts with terms that actually made sense. I reorganized teams, shut down vanity projects that had been draining resources, and instituted a real accountability framework. Meanwhile, I treated Daniel exactly how he treated me before he fired me, like a nuisance. I ignored his suggestions in meetings, redirected praise to junior staff who actually did the work, and only spoke to him when absolutely necessary. Once, when he tried to advise me on a major account strategy, I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Don't worry, Daniel. I'm not here to take advice from the person who almost ran this company into the ground." Harsh? Maybe. But fair? Absolutely. Eventually, he stopped trying to assert himself. He started showing up to meetings just to sit silently, nod, and take notes. That's when I knew he finally understood what it felt like to be sidelined. After 90 days, the company was back on solid ground. Client confidence was high, teams were motivated, and revenue was trending back up. Daniel called me into his office one morning, the same office where he once delivered my transition notice. "I owe you an apology," he said. I waited. "I let ego get in the way. You were never just part of the company. You were the backbone." I nodded, but I didn't let him off the hook. "You didn't just let ego get in the way. You betrayed someone who helped you build something out of nothing. That trust, it doesn't come back just because you say sorry." He looked away, ashamed. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and added, "This company is standing because I made sure it could, not because you deserve it." And with that, I walked out. Not because I was bitter, but because I had done what I came back to do. Make him feel every inch of what he made me go through and still rise above it. 3 months after I walked away for the second and final time, I sat in a quiet cafe with a notebook open in front of me. No clients calling, no late-night emergencies, no one depending on me to carry their chaos, just peace and clarity. That company, the one Daniel and I built, had been my identity for 15 years. I poured everything into it, my time, my skills, my health, my loyalty. And when I was discarded, I thought I had lost everything, but I hadn't. What I lost was the illusion that loyalty would be rewarded, that hard work guaranteed protection, that friendship was stronger than greed. What I gained was freedom. I realized that all those years, I had been building someone else's dream, and worse, I had done it while bearing my own. So I started something new. Not a business built around flashy promises or scale-at-all-costs nonsense, but a consultancy focused on sustainable systems and ethical leadership. Real value, no fluff. And clients came fast. Turns out, when you've built and saved a company from collapse, people take you seriously. But more importantly, I was finally working with people who respected the work, who valued partnership, and who didn't see employees as disposable pieces on a board. A few months in, I heard through the grapevine that Daniel had stepped down quietly. The board had grown tired of the instability. He walked away with money, sure, but not respect, not trust, and definitely not the legacy he wanted. Meanwhile, mine was growing, not because I sought revenge, not because I tried to beat him, but because I focused on doing what I'd always done, build with integrity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's doing well, quietly, powerfully, on your own terms. So to anyone who's ever been undervalued, overlooked, or betrayed in the very place they helped build, hear this. You don't need their title. You don't need their permission, and you sure as hell don't need their validation. You are the value. They just realized it too late.